Hey everybody, welcome to 3D6 Charge, a podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k, the state of the game, and community news. We're streaming live at Twitch/3D6Charge every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We're also on Spotify or iTunes. Just search 3D6 Charge podcast. This is episode 46, New Sisters and Meta Check-In. I am your host, Chris Vo, and joining me tonight is Kevin Lieb. Kevin, we didn't hear you.
Howdy, howdy.
There we go. And Benjamin Rubenstein.
Hello. Is my microphone working?
Yes, it is. Perfect.
Excellent.
So let's outline what we want to talk about tonight. So first off, Kevin and I got a game in over the weekend, even though there was a Magic the Gathering pre-release event trying to stop us. The new Sisters Codex came out. And noted Sisters enthusiast Benjamin will be guiding us through that and letting us know what kind of crazy combos or something, whatever's cool in the book. And then let's do a meta check-in. Let's see how the meta has been shaping up over the past month or so. And another piece of news is the Games Workshop released the official Games Workshop tournament packet for the the Orlando events, Austin, Texas, and New Orleans events. We'll go over that briefly. There's nothing really crazy about it if you've ever read the Nova tournament packet, which makes sense because Mike Brandt wrote it. But I want to go over the terrain layouts that are in the GT. But yeah, Kevin, how is my house?
It was wonderful.
So we had planned to play Friday evening after work, and Kevin got up to the store, and the kind woman at the front was like, "I'm sorry, but I'm gonna have to ask you to leave," because every single available table was the Magic the Gathering pre-release that was going on. So.
Oh yeah, that was this weekend, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
That would get in the way.
Yeah.
Damn you, Modern Horizons.
Is it Modern Horizons 2?
It's Modern Horizons 2.
Man, the disrespect from this man.
Listen, if you knew what Modern Horizons 2 was, you knew what I meant, and if you didn't, you didn't care.
I don't know what it means. So
I fall into neither of those categories. I care, but I don't know what it is. All right, moving on.
Kevin had to drive like 90 minutes, and I was like, well, shit, I only live like 10 minutes from the game store. I don't want to ask him to drive like another 30 minutes to another game store that might also be having a pre-release event for Magic. So I was like, fuck it, just come over to my house. I was, having a little impromptu cookout when I made too many like burgers and, invited my in-laws over and stuff. So invited Kevin over, grabbed the folding table out of the basement, grabbed my 40-inch by 66-inch board out of the basement as well, and my bucket of terrain, and started rolling some dice. I brought the same Death Guard list that I had brought to the tournament previous weekend, mostly because it was still in the army bag and I hadn't unpacked it, so it was pretty easy to just grab that. Evan, you brought, what did you
bring? Death Watch.
You brought your Death Watch, yes. Very infantry heavy list, a lot of kill teams.
Yep. 4 characters, and the rest of it were technically troops. So all the OBSEC you could ever wish for.
Yeah, basically everything was OBSEC except for the characters, and there was a healthy amount of, what's the name of the heavy intercessor type kill team?
Indomitors.
Yeah, there were plenty of Indomitor kill teams with plenty of Eradicators. So,
I think the Eradicators whiffed shooting at everything they shot at that game.
They did. I don't think they actually killed anything.
Yeah.
hard for eradicators to do.
I also like tried my damnedest to give your eradicators not a lot of opportunities to shoot at any targets, let alone good targets. And I did that to my own detriment. So spoiler alert, like Kevin won like I think it was like 80 to 56 or something like that.
84?
80 like 84 to 56, 55. I can't remember the exact score, but it was somewhere in that realm. And like a lot of my points was just based on like while we stand. Like I just took that and then I just hid from the eradicators, which also meant that I hid basically everything else and wasn't really able to establish a real board presence on the game. So I don't want to go like the turn by turn of how our game went because frankly I don't think that'll be that interesting. But I kind of want to go over the broad strokes of it and talk about any lessons learned from the game that we took and how you're going to use that info like in the future to inform list design or how you play the army. Kevin, you want to go first with that?
So I know many podcasts ago I talked about how I was a little bit off of Spectre's kill teams. I was wrong. They were my MVP of that game. They got to start onto objective, raise banners there, and Chris being a slow army that kind of relies on deep strike to like bully people off of points, he just like couldn't get within range of them within a reasonable period of time. It's one of the reasons why I was able to get so far ahead on the primary. One of the things I tried was 2 old school kill teams with 4 bikers and a vanguard vet added on. These guys rode up and also rose banners because they're able to move 14 inches, but because they have the vanguard vet, they're infantry. And so when Chris deployed pretty far back to play around the eradicators, I just got the entire board and was able to raise banners. So
Right, because they move 14, but because they're infantry, they can also go through buildings and do actions, right?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Those bikes, most infantry bikes, flying
Yes.
right through buildings, raising banners, flying scramblers, as one does, or retrieving data these days, I guess.
Yeah, raising banners. Listen, he just like rides up and slams it into the ground. It's nothing
It's more
confusing.
of a ride by bannering than a real raise.
That being said, one of the things I normally do in these types of lists is bring a chaplain on bike and give him the beacon and jealous. I wanted to try putting it on a Terminator chaplain to have him be able to come in, spend the 2 CP to get the +2 litany auto chanted, and then beacon something like wherever I wanted on the board. And with that, I wanted to try a cheaper, resilient unit that could kind of like hold up to things. So I went with an Indominator kill team with the assault bolters on the heavy intercessors and flame aggressors. To be something that could kind of like bop things up with the aggressors because aggressors bop in melee. Really good in Overwatch and can actually like take a hit. So they did a pretty good job on taking the hit. They weren't great against Chris, but they did kind of still complete the job of kind of being something that could push up to the midfield, have it not die, and be a bully in the midfield. So, unfortunately, they went into Blightlord Terminators, and like between the 4 Binvils and the reducing damage by 1, they didn't like even manage to kill a full Blightlord Terminator unit in one go. But like that's kind of like one of the worst matchups they can go into. So, I'll think about that. The important part here being is the chaplain with the Beacon and Jealous, and I'm just thinking I always have to do the bike chaplain. Having to wait an entire turn kind of defeats like half the value that you get out of the Beacon and Jealous. Like that turn 1 threat is important, even if you don't actually use it. The fact that your opponent has to play around it is important. Also with the Beacon and Jealous, I ended up splitting up the Indominator kill team squad with the heavy with the Eradicators. And I think that was a mistake because I ended up dragging a unit forward with it when I finally did bring the Terminator Chaplain in, but I only brought half the unit, and it just didn't feel like the right amount of shooting, and I was keeping them pretty far back to keep them safe. So like the second half that kind of stayed back never got to get pulled forward, and I think if we were to play that matchup again, I would definitely not break up that squad and just keep them in one big unit.
You want them to keep their ablative wounds?
Yeah. And to get buffs, like there are certain defensive buffs and other things. Like, yeah, it's worse CP wise for transhuman physiology, but like I do have a 5 up Feel No Pain spell. And I couldn't ever think about putting it on either half because Chris would just shoot the other half with his mortars. So it just like I felt like it was a bit of a blunder on my side.
Gotcha.
Also, I have a bike captain in the list, and he has the 5-inch aura of a 5 up invuln. Being able to string out that unit with like heavy intercessors in the back towards that, because I could just like reach further, would be something I could see needing to do. So, I'm not saying that never split up the Indominator kill team, but I definitely think it's something I need to actually really think through the matchup and how the matchup is going to play a little bit more. I was a little bit too happy to do that in this game.
Sure.
Would you like to go, Chris?
Yeah. So, definitely one of the things that I realize is like I let my fear of the eradicators totally dictate my deployment. So, let me paint a word picture. The deployment was like that stupid diagonal one, and we had like a big piece of obscuring terrain in basically each of the corners. And I tried my damnedest to basically hide everything I could behind that one building. Downside of doing that, especially as a non-mobile army, I didn't take my movement into account, basically, because like I had that one objective on my mind. It was just, all right, how do I like if he gets turn one, how do I not like lose like 2 tanks or like an entire Terminator squad to eradicators, which if they're out in the open and they're targetable, that's a very real possibility for that to happen. But because I did that, now like my 10-man unit of Plague Marines, like how many turns did it take for me to get to that corner objective? 3 turns with a charge?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you had parked one of your Spectre's kill teams because they had scout deploy on it like turn 0. You had it from the very beginning. You raised banners. You kept collecting points on it every turn. And at like max speed, it took me 3 turns to get there. It took me half the game to get there. And that's just doing nothing but moving. I wasn't shooting. I wasn't fighting. I wasn't interrupting actions. I wasn't contesting objectives. I was straight up just running flat out as fast as I could to that spot. And I'm a very slow army, so it takes me a while to get places. So I have to not let that sort of thing dictate my deployment. I have to understand that, like, hey, I might lose stuff if if the other person goes first. If my opponent goes first, he might shoot some things. There's not always going to be perfect obscuring cover or whatever. But what I should probably do is maybe put out maybe a more wounds, more something tougher that can like weather like that first turn hit. You know, and if there's an off chance that there's enough firepower to do that, then I gotta have a plan B. But that's going further down game planning. I was aggressive deploying one particular unit. That was my Demon Prince with the super rating plate and rotten constitution. Basically, like the super tough like Death Guard beat stick, where it's a toughness 7 Demon Prince with a 2-up armor save that ignores AP 1 and 2. Still has like all of the disgustingly resilient roll. And I deployed him super aggressively, hoping to get off a turn 1 charge against another Spectre's kill team. Now, I want you to imagine that that diagonal deployment. So I have everything basically like in my corner, maybe like a 10-inch diameter circle. I had everything parked in. And then way out on the along the long edge of my deployment zone, as far forward as down that line as I could, I put my demon prince. Now, keep in mind, like a demon prince has 9 wounds, 8 wounds. It can benefit from being protected by a vehicle. I could have very easily taken one of my 3 plague burst crawlers and like just stuck it near him so that he couldn't be targeted the first turn, just in case. And if I lost the tank, well, that sucks. But tanks are tough. The demon prince is tough. They're both at least one of them is going to survive. You know. So that was another thing that I need to take into account in the future. Basically, it's a lot of my mistakes were just like should have just deployment. But the third points that I want to take away from this is picking secondary objectives. So my default 3 secondaries with this list have been deploy scramblers. I can't remember what recon is called, but recon.
Engage in all fronts.
Engage in all fronts. And while we stand, we fight, which has been my unit of Blightlord Terminators and 2 of my 3 Plague Burst Crawlers. Now, I had picked While We Stand, We Fight, and I knew that if Kevin really wanted to, if he could get his Eradicators all in position and target one of those units, that's an easy, effectively, like it picks him up 5 points by denying me my 5 for having that unit survive. And I was basically terrified of that happening. So instead of picking a secondary where it's based on, you know, me trying to be on the offensive or, you know, me just like playing my game, you know, I had an objective where if I, you know, fumbled the bag, I hand 5 points away to my opponent. And it rewards me for taking my unit and parking it in the back and hiding it and keeping it safe from, you know, people with, you know, bad things to say about it. And while, yes, that gets me point in the end, it doesn't help me affect the board state. You know?
Yeah. So the Plague Burst Crawlers were fine because essentially all their shooting was far enough range, but it made one of your infantry melee beat 6, the Terminators, kind of get deployed and used so far back that like they never were relevant. Like I know I didn't get the 5 points for killing them, but they didn't do anything in the game.
They never contested any objectives until like the very last turn, and at which point the game was decided.
Yeah, I don't like While We Stand, We Fight. When you're taking a unit like those melee Terminators and saying you can't use them, you kind of either have to accept that you're only going to get 10 points for them and not worry about protecting those Terminators, or find some other way, like pushing the unit to 10 because 10 is like actually miserable to kill, or doing something to change it up so it's like all 3 Believer Scrawlers.
Yeah,
Can I push that unit to 10? I do own 15 of them.
What was it?
Yeah.
I was saying like I could push it to 10. Like I just gotta figure out what to drop because I own 15 Blight Lords. So.
I actually think that it might be the 3 Plague Burst Crawler side, not the.
Yeah. Drop them from the list. Bring more troops. There's something wrong with Plague Marines, and Poxwalkers are good.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I also I cleaned up my hobby space, and I've been like opening up like all these boxes and stuff that I kind of like, where I've had like half done like projects. I'll just get distracted by like painting for a tournament or whatever, and I just put it away so I have room. So I found 28 Poxwalkers. So I have like 40 of them now. So I've got plenty. I also just won an auction on eBay for 20 old metal Plague Marines. So I've got plenty of those now too.
Yeah, the real trick is you put wings on your Demon Prince, and then he becomes a While We Stand, We Fight target. Now we're talking.
Yeah.
Wing value.
That brings him
it's
up
like
to
it's like the captain with 2 Thunderhammers. Just like doesn't do anything, but now you have to kill him.
To be fair, the Demon Prince on his own is a credible threat. Yeah. So I mean, those were my takeaways from the game.
And if in our game, I felt like similar things happened where you took Well We Said We Fight, and then you end up playing way too cagey with those Terminators, which were kind of your best bet at killing my drone screens. Like, you should have put them in Deep Strike, done nothing on turn 1, and then turn 2, brought them down, killed as many drones as you possibly could have, and then see where your anti-tank firepower can get you. But instead, you were kind of concerned about hiding them behind some buildings, which meant that they were like crawling at me, and I could just ignore them.
Yeah. If I mean, one way to think about it, if you ever feel like the Blight Alert Terminators can get you one primary tick of points, that's you've gotten back here while you stand your fight, and maybe it might end up being more in the long run.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it.
It's also worth thinking, like, if you can get a different secondary.
I agree.
Bringing more Poxwalkers. That's I always get those two mixed up. Bringing more Poxwalkers is also neat because you can do the Death Guard specific
spread the sickness.
raise banners, which is like 3 points per objective that you can get Poxwalkers on, which is like pretty good.
You also keep it as long as like for the rest of the game. It doesn't matter if you take back the objective. I read that correctly.
Yeah, it's just 3 points. Yep. Yeah, you do some damage to your Poxwalkers, whatever they're Poxwalkers, then you get 3 points and you get to keep them, which is excellent.
All right. So Benjamin, you wanna walk us through the new sisters?
Codex Morbin Vol. Yeah, sure. So yeah, we can start with that. The Pope is absurd. I'm sure you've all seen this now at this point. It's been going around the internet. She outclasses Gilman in every possible way. Like, it's not close.
Let's go over that. So melee, how's she better in melee?
So she's 5 attacks with a Thunder Hammer that does a mortal wound on 6s to wound, but she's got full rerolls to hit and wound, and at the end of the fight phase, she's engaged at range with anything she gets to fight again. Also, instead of the smashes, she can also do a swing, which is 10 attacks at 5-2-1, which is pretty interesting, again, when you're rolling all of your hits and wounds.
For those who haven't played against Gilman in a while, he can no longer reroll his wound rolls.
Yeah, he doesn't reroll his own wound rolls. Does he still reroll his own hit rolls?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, she's on full rerolls to hit and wound. So she's better at, rendering things. Defensively, she doesn't
and she
have
fights twice.
Yeah, she doesn't have the 3-up invulnerable save that Gilman does. She's a 4-up invulnerable save, but she has 8 wounds and takes half damage. And then, unlike Gilman, you can't smite her down because she's a 4-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds. I'm not sure why they felt the need to put that particular line of text on her, but there it is. So she, for all intents and purposes, has 16 wounds, unless you're like actually just shooting 1 damage guns at her. And then she's got 2-up armor and a 4-up invulnerable save, T5. So she's kind of just incredible. And then in shooting, she's got a twin missile launcher, so that's great. And that strength 6 heavy bolter, which is also real good. Hits on 2s. For buff auras, she's got a 6-inch aura of reroll 1s to hit and reroll 1s to wound for core sisters. And by the way, everything's core in this book. Like, it's the only things that aren't core are the vehicles, and the vehicles are bad. So whatever. The wheeled vehicles, or the track vehicles, I should say. The vehicles with legs are core. So
the walkers are core.
Yeah. We can get to those in a second. But yeah, basically the only things that are not core are characters, rhinos, the new tank, the Razorback equivalent, and exorcists. And outside of rhinos, those things are all bad, so it really didn't hit them at all. Anyway, so yeah, she's got the 6-inch aura of reroll 1s to hit and reroll 1s to wound. And then her Chapter Master ability, right, is pick a unit, except that it's reroll all hit rolls and all wound rolls for that unit. And she picks within 6 inches, and you get that until the beginning of your next turn. It's insane. It's unbelievable how good this is.
Yeah, that sounds pretty nuts.
Because there's some really wild combos that you can do it too. So, for example, sisters now have Chaplains. We should probably talk about the Chaplains because they're really good. They're just like Space Marine Chaplains. You roll a die and a 3-up, it does a thing. they can get super chaplains. It's a relic instead of like a unit upgrade. I'm not sure why they chose to do it this way, but there it is. So you have a relic that makes your chaplain be able to incite 2. Unlike Space Marines, there's like 4 different types of chaplains, and they have like different limitations of what prayers they can take. There's basically the basic prayer, which is +1 attack, then like 3 lesser prayers, and then 3 greater prayers. Different chaplains can take different ones. The chaplain that I think is pretty easily the best one can take from any of them. It's only 65 points. And beyond being able to pray, she also can pick a unit to make it obsec, or if it's already unit obsec, makes it double obsec within 6 inches of herself. And gets to pick a unit, and that unit can do actions and shoot without failing the action. And then the prayers that are kind of worth talking about, there's the base prayer is +1 attack, which is to a single unit, which is pretty good. Then there's pick a unit. It becomes a null maiden, like remove all psychic powers that are currently affecting it, and it can't be affected by psychic powers until your next turn. This is kind of incredible when like you consider sisters you can go to 20-man blocks. If you're playing against like Thousand Sons or Grey Knights, you can just like literally take 20 sisters and just put them in front of your army and be like, looks like I'm immune to smite this turn. And they can't do anything.
You do have to lock these in at the beginning of the game, right? Oh, sorry, before you see your opponent's list, right?
Yeah, but keep like the basic power being +1 attack means that oftentimes you're going to be bringing a priest whose job is just to do that every time. So like you can kind of just have an extra prayer, and that's one of the lesser prayers too. So when I say less, so like that's not one that you need, which means that the cheaper ones can take it. So I believe you can take a guy who's like 35 points and just be like, his job is to either give +1 attack or do that. So you're not really paying a lot to do that.
And if it really matters, you can auto cant it, right? Auto chant
Yeah,
it.
for a command point, you can just auto do it.
1?
1. You just can't attempt to do a different one. The other ones that are worth talking about are pick a unit. It gets +1 on invulnerable saves. This is relevant for 2 reasons. First one is +1 on invulnerable saves is great. And the second one is the sisters have lost their ability to stack invulnerable save buffs. They just have that one warlord trait to get to a 5-up. And anything with a jetpack baseline gets +1 on invulnerable saves. So jetpacks can still get to 4 pretty easily, but everything else is pretty much sticking to a 5 near the warlord. And you're not going to see too many 4-up invulnerable saves outside of like one big unit, sometimes going to 4.
That's not bad though. I mean, from what I understand, those jetpack units are pretty damn good.
Yes, the jetpack units are great. But the thing was that you used to very easily be able to get a large amount of your army in just 4-up invulnerable save baseline. Because Celestine, Junith, and a warlord could all have that ability, and they could kind of just like float around and spread the love. And then the last prayer that is worth talking about is you pick a unit, and all of their bolt weapons automatically wound on 6s to hit and gain an extra armor penetration within half range. This is gross when you combine it with full rerolls to hit from either Junith, who's Armored Lady, basically Chapter Master, or Morgan Vol. And gets even sillier when you combine it with, there's a new strat for one command point that until the end of the phase, all Storm Bolters in a unit do 2 mortal wounds on 6s to hit and then you just end the attack sequence for that weapon. This caps at 6, but you can take 4 Storm Bolters in a unit, so that's 16 attacks.
Right, and since they've like what's the word I'm looking for? They standardized the writing on reroll abilities, so you can just reroll all of your 5s and below and just fish for those 6s.
Yeah, so what we're probably going to see pretty often is blocks of sisters, and it doesn't have to be a block of 20 sisters too, because their fast attack unit can just take 4 Stormbolters in the squad. So you're just going to see people like point at that squad with full rerolls to hit, and then just going to be like 16 dice, pick up one on 6s, roll them again. The first 3 6s are mortal wounds, and every 6 after that just goes straight to wounding you. So
how big does that squad have to get to 4 Stormbolters?
5.
You're talking about Dominions, right?
Yep. Dominion squads, 5 sisters is 4 Stormbolters, because they can take 4 special weapons base.
Let's circle back to that unit in a second.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that unit a lot. But Dominions or the big sister block can both take 4 Stormbolters, and you're going to hit 6. You only need reroll 1s to hit 6 wounds, by the way. Like, if you have 2 storm bolters on full rerolls, you're hitting 6 a lot of the time. It's the math on it's really gross how easy it is just to spend 1 command point and generate 6 mortal wounds, to the point where you're probably doing it every turn. So if you're playing against sisters, just like be aware that like whatever your favorite unit is just like taking 6 mortal wounds every turn, and there's almost nothing you can do about it. Which for some armies is kind of crippling. On top of that, let's talk about some things that did get worse though. Because it is worth noting that like, this book isn't just like straight up better. The big one is Retrometer Squads. So Retrometer Squads got cheaper, which I know a lot of people think is crazy, but they lost the ability to move and shoot without penalty, which is gigantic. And capping that with all the ways to get full rerolls to hit require them to be out of a vehicle at the beginning of the command phase means that if they're traveling around in a Rhino, they're not going to be able to get that bonus. This means that most Retributors are hitting on 4s. Also, command points got way better, so mixing and matching attachments is a lot harder for sisters than it used to be. It used to be not particularly challenging to take like just 2 different attachments of sisters and make 1 bloody rose so you get all the best melee things and make the other one something else. And now I suspect we're going to see most sisters lists just be like monofaction, because you just want every command point you can possibly get. Their command points are so good now. So this does mean now that if you want the best melee, it's still Bloody Rose. They're +1 AP and +1 attack on the charge. Sorry, they're +1 AP. You have +1 AP and +1 attack on the charge, which is a bit worse because they used to be +1 AP all the time, and they used to be +1 AP on pistols. Losing the pistol thing makes Seraphim a lot worse for them, but it also kind of lets GW point Seraphim in a way that Seraphim, yes, thank you for the finger guns. Seraphim are the sisters that have jetpacks and 2 pistols. The lets GW point Seraphim in a way that every faction can use them, which is kind of nice. Because before, Seraphim were kind of just at the point where they were pointed for Bloody Rose and everyone else could look at them and be sad. There is still a good shooting faction though, which is the faction that I think is probably it's Bloody Rose or this faction here are probably the best out of the book, which is Argent Shroud. Argent Shroud's ability used to be you can advance and shoot as though you were remaining stationary, and this has been updated to you can advance and shoot as though you're remaining stationary, and every time you shoot or fight, you can reroll 1 hit roll or 1 wound roll. This is insane. So this is Retributors now being able to advance and shoot, still hitting on 3s with a free reroll to hit and a free reroll to wound. So when they only make like 6 shots. So if or 8 shots with multi-meltal. So if you make your 8 shots, hitting on 3s, rerolling 1s, if they all hit, which is not unreasonable. Now you can just like convert your reroll to a wound roll.
This is particularly heinous with cherubs, right?
Yeah, we're probably going to need an FAQ on this because they've significantly changed the way they've worded cherubs, and it's unclear if their goal is for cherubs to only shoot once per turn, which would not be an unreasonable goal. But as they've currently worded it, it's definitely not what's happening.
But even if it is just 1, you do get that 1 wound or hit reroll as part of the cherub activation, right?
As of now, yeah, it's you're shooting the unit again, so you'd be getting another reroll every time you pop a cherub, which is really silly. So this makes Argent Shroud Retributors be able to move really, really far before they start shooting and hit unbelievably hard when they do. It's also probably worth noting at this point that Storm of Retribution is gone. It knows what it did. It's good that it's gone because it would have been way, way too good with this version of the codex.
Storm of Retribution is the additional range and additional damage on multi-guns, right?
Yeah, Storm of Retribution. It actually has other text, but don't tell it that.
Nobody cares about that.
It also gave full reroll to wounds for heavy flamers and +1 to hit for heavy bolters, but whatever. It functionally was just +1 damage and +12 inches in range for multi-meltas. It has now been changed to a line of text on Retributors that their heavy weapons ignore the cover.
Dense, right?
No, I believe it's actually light cover.
Well, heavy covers for melee, so
yeah. It's not a big deal. It's not like particularly important when like they're mostly firing melta guns. Although they do have the heavy flamers now very good too, because for 2 command points you can max out heavy flamers, like max out the number of shots. And this becomes very interesting with just like squads of 4 heavy flamers. Like Sisters, one of like the few matchups that Sisters could really, really struggle with was Necrons, because Sisters have a lot of like really sweet, like move a unit really far, be like a really good melee hammer, smash a bunch of Marines to death, they could pop tanks like they were nothing. But sometimes your opponent just put like 20 OBSEC Necrons in the middle of the table, and you just like didn't have the thing that could kill that. And now you can just walk heavy flamers over and just be like, all right, 36, they're gone. You just max them out. You have 4 dudes with heavy flamers and have a Sister Superior with a melta gun, give them +1 to wound with the Holy Trinity strat, and now you've got, and heavy flamers are strength 6 now in the Sisters Codex because I don't know, they needed to be better. This also means that against like Dark Eldar, your heavy flamers are just like winning on 2's base, so I think we're gonna start seeing a lot more Sisters heavy flamers.
Argent Shroud is also the they're the ones that have the strat that increases the range, right? And does mortal wounds.
No, that is Ibn Chalice, who were done dirty by the new codex. So a big part of the new codex is that you get fewer miracle dice. You're not going to see Sisters players with piles and piles of miracle dice. They've turned almost every way of getting miracle dice off. So you get one at the beginning of the turn, you get one at the end of every phase that you've killed a unit, and you get one at the end of every phase where one of your characters have died. That's it. Denying psychic powers, miracle dice are gone. Making morale tests is gone. The warlord trait that used to give you one every turn is gone, and now it just gives you one, and only your warlord can use it. The Triumph of St. Catherine has gone up, 30 points, and now only gives you 1 per phase and lost a bunch of other abilities, so we're probably just not going to see it get played. The other way of getting it is the stupid Sisters fortification. I call it stupid. The rules on it are sick, but it's like a foot and a half wide.
But it's a fortification.
Yeah, it's like a foot and a half wide, so you're not actually allowed to deploy it. So
how many
the rules
points
can be
is
as
it?
50. It's really good. But
no,
it's just like actually unplayable.
I want to circle back to that at some point because don't get me wrong. Let's say you knew when one of your matchups you're going to be on a planet bowling ball and you can deploy it. Is it worth playing your other 4 matchups down 50 points to like actually win that bowling ball?
Be because I mean, they added the obscuring keyword to it.
If I had spent the money on that fortification and I'd spent the time to paint it, and I wasn't like completely dead set on trying to score as many points as possible, then like, yeah, I totally would.
So the issue with it too is they added the obscuring keyword to it, which means that now GW is probably highly incentivized to never let fortifications be playable, because as I said, it's just colossal. So if they ever change the rules to like let you decide where you're putting your fortifications, it would be like pretty trivial to put it down and then just put literally your entire army behind it. Like you could just hide your entire army. It's hilariously big.
That being said, there are planning there might be a tournament where you go to a planning bowling ball, and it could be worthwhile thinking about. It'd be weird because it would mean like you'd have to know the tournament would have like a bad table or two. But hey,
things have happened.
Yeah,
losing less is a worthwhile thing to spend points on. Winning more is bad, but losing less is good.
So important that you get way fewer miracle dice. So there's fewer guaranteed charges. Like Sisters players are gonna have to like actually roll charge rolls, because charge rolls take 2 miracle dice to guarantee. And fast attack slots. Fast attack slots are like super contested now, because it used to just be like you took some Seraphim maybe. And then Zephyrum, who were like the sword flying sisters, were elites. Well, they've moved Zephyrum to the fast attack slot. And they're very, very good. They got a little bit worse. They lost the full reroll to wounds, but they got +1 attack. So now they do better when you buff them, but worse unbuffed. Overall, I like they're still playable. But they also Dominions, which are the fast attack unit. First of all, they can take 4 Storm Bolters into 5 Sister Squad for 80 points. This is excellent. And they regained their old codex ability, like they're like sisters, like the sisters. Yeah, and I guess it wasn't index ability, but it was also in the Sisters like beta codex to scout move vehicles that they are in at the beginning of the game. They've reduced the scout move to 6 inches, which is good because it used to be 9 and you could advance, which was silly. But even if when it's just 6 inches, this means like a rhino can move like 18 inches down the table or move 6 inches, let out its unit of like advancing and shooting heavy flamer retributors or whatever is in it, and then like go about its business. So Dominions are really, really good now, and they're good to the point where we might actually see them push out Seraphim and Zephyrum, which is wild because Seraphim and Zephyrum are excellent action monkeys, because they have the one command point, just put themselves back in deep strike at the beginning of the movement phase. So they can like come down, do an action. If they survive, just like jump back up in the skies, which in most GW tables, if you like put them behind a building, your opponent's now like deciding, do I commit this unit to kill like 5 bolter sisters, or do I like actually go do something? And if they commit the unit, well, you've traded like your 70-point flying unit for your opponent having a pretty poorly positioned unit now that presumably costs more points. And if they don't, then you just spend a command point, put them back in the sky, and they go back to being action monkeys. That's also great. And like I'm now, when I'm fiddling with sisters lists, looking at just like cutting my Zephyr because I really want the 3rd unit of Dominions so I can scout move my 3rd Rhino and I can have a 3rd unit of 4 Stormbolters. Because Sister Stormbolters are also base damage 2 now, because GW wanted every weapon to be worth 5 points or at 10 points because they have this obsession with everything being divisible by 5. And rather than just the old method, which was make it 5 points, people will pay for it, and then watch people not pay for it. They've just decided to make them worth 5 points. So Hand Flamers are strength 4, Stormbolters are damage 2, Heavy Flamers are 10 points, so they're strength 6. What are the other like 5-point upgrades that got weird? I think those are the big ones.
I mean, making Stormbolter damage 2, like, while I don't think that's the best, I think it's better than leaving it as damage 1 and still charging 5 points for it.
Yeah, and at damage 2, they start getting pretty goofy. Because remember, we have like the prayer for in half range, your AP 1, and all your 6s auto wounds, so you can like throw full rerolls.
Yeah, that's the main reason I don't like the damage 2.
And you can like throw full rerolls at a unit, get them within half range, which is 12 inches, which isn't that hard, especially when they're like scout moving a rhino and then getting out of the rhino. Although then you can't combo with that particular ability. And then just like fish for 6s and just start popping marines.
Yeah.
And then you have a different unit with their 16 shots, rerolling 1s, and then you can spend your command point on them and have them just doing a bunch of mortal wounds.
Yeah, it's weird. I'm glad that they're justifying it. I think it's better that way. It feels weird to me that Space Marine Stormbolters aren't that way, because they are also 5 points. I get Space Marines have Bolter Discipline, but like 2 damage and Bolter Discipline are not equivalent.
Yeah, it's so on the Terminators, I think it's probably about equal, but on like base dudes who are not Terminators, it's like way out of whack. Like you never want to spend that points on a non-Terminator with a Stormbolter.
See, it's like, yeah, I agree. That being said, though, there are regular Stormbolters in that codex. There aren't just Ministorum artificers.
Yes, just to make you super confused, all of the Stormbolters that are in people's hands are 2 damage. And all of the Stormbolters that are not in people's hands are 1 damage. So anything that's on a Rhino is 1 damage. The new Dominion Warsuits have 2 Stormbolters on their shoulders. Those are 1 damage. A lot of the tanks have Stormbolters on them. Those are 1 damage.
But what about the 5 points I'm spending on the second Rhino Stormbolter, Ben? Is that gone. 2 damage?
You can't purchase those anymore.
Oh, those are gone.
All right. Yeah. So on top of the, well, I agree that moving Stormbolters to 2 damage, if they're going to be 5 points, is going in the right direction. I mean, it's not moving backwards, so there's that, I guess. But then I don't know, like making the vehicle ones not also 2 damage while retaining the same exact name. I think that's just poor game design on their
different names. Sorry, I've been shortcutting it as Stormbolters. They are Artificer Stormbolters, and they're not Heavy Flamers. They're Ministorum heavy flamers. All the flamer equivalents have the word Ministorum in front and have 1 more strength than non-Ministorum.
Okay,
versions.
so this is like Admech taking like every Imperial weapon and just adding Cognus to the front.
Yeah, much like Cognus, Artificer and Ministorum means better.
Okay.
Because Space Marines get all the crap stuff.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, we are the sisters of the church, and like the church gets the best of everything, including leaders. Gilman's a chump. He wishes he cost 100 points left and was outclassed in every possible way. I legitimately think that Morven Vol might go up 150 points before the edition is over.
Oh, I absolutely anticipate that too. Just comparing
my buddy
it to
and I have been
Gilman.
talking about her. We're both sisters players, trying to like figure out like basically what's the points cost where you no longer start every sisters list with Morven Vol, and it's like 400. It's like somewhere in the 400 range.
Yeah, I mean Gilman is like
where
around,
we start going. All right, we cut Morven Vol.
Gilman's about like 380, and that's like just about the point where he wasn't an auto take in every single Space Marine list ever. Because back when he was like 300-ish, like it was a no-brainer.
So one of the key differences with Gilman is playing with a really bad chapter tactic. Morgan Ball can just play with the best chapter tactic that, like, you want to have her buff a shooting unit, put her with the best shooting faction. Like, don't get me wrong, the Ultramarines tactic is like, it's probably one of the better vehicle ones because you can't get touched. You can actually just float away. But that's about it. It's not actually that good of a chapter tactic.
Yeah. The other thing with the Sisters book is that they kind of hard counter some armies that don't exist yet. Like Thousand Sons of Grey Knights are coming out soon, and they already have a worse matchup, and that matchup is Sisters. Because one of the Sisters mechanics is they have a blessing. It's basically their super doctrine, but they get to pick it at the beginning of the game. They have 6 options. They have an option that's terrible, which is whenever one of them dies in melee, on a 6, their attacker takes 1 mortal wound to a maximum of 6 mortal wounds. Why do they have to cap it? Unclear. This trait's terrible. +1 to advance and charge is excellent. 6 to hit in melee or 2 hits, also excellent. 6s to wound in shooting are an extra armor penetration, also real good. If I remember correctly, it's your units add 1 to combat attrition tests, which basically means you're immune to combat attrition. If you're above half strength and below half strength, it's just 1s that make you run away. And at 6s, and then on 6s, the 6th one rather is normally when sisters try to deny the witch, they do it on 1d6, which means they're never actually doing it successfully, except that 6s automatically deny the witch regardless of what the casting roll was. And the last option for their Sacred Blessing is that it's 5s and 6s that auto deny. So, and every single unit in the codex can try to deny the witch at 24 inches. This includes the vehicles. So basically, like Armin casts 3 spells, and you go, all right, my Rhino, my Sisters of Battle, and the character that got out of the Rhino are all going to try and deny, and like the Rhino is going to succeed, like on a 5-up. Like one of your powers just doesn't work. In addition, this is a Deny the Witch test. You can re-roll it for a command point. So like 33% to deny it. And then for another command point on a 4-up, you could deny a psychic power. So like basically, if you're ever in a situation where your opponent casts a power and you're like, if they get this off, it's real bad. And if they don't, I probably win the game. Like, I don't know, Warp Timing Magnus back or something. You can just be like, I'm going to roll 3d6. And if I get a 5-up, a 5-up, or a 4-up, it doesn't go off. Oh, look, I denied your power. He's like stuck in front of my army. Looks like I'm shooting 20 Melta Guns on him next turn.
As a chaos player,
we also have the prayer for
we also have the prayer for just pick a unit and ignore psychic powers. So you could like pick a Rhino and just like throw it at your opponent and just be like, yeah, deal with that Rhino, I guess.
And keep in mind the opportunity cost is like very
actually
low.
I lied. You can't do it to a Rhino. That's not true. Rhino's not core, but you can do it to like 5 sisters. And because it's just for the psychic phase, like it's not like they can kill the sister squad until the end of the psychic phase. So those 5 sisters are just going to basically turn off smite for their army. Maybe not for Grey Knights, because Grey Knights might maintain the ability to shoot in the psychic phase, but at least for Thousand Sons, and other mortal wound based psychic armies, those are just they're 0% against sisters. It's really bad.
Yeah.
As far as weaknesses go, there are toughness 3. Like every model is toughness 3.
I
Like-
don't know.
That's a little bit of a reprieve, but like it doesn't do much. It's like, oh, your house is on fire, but like, hey, at least you remember to water your plants.
I don't think they are at like Drakari or Admech levels of just like they're gonna pick up your whole army and you just watch them outscore you. They do like have to make like in list building, they are like having to make the decision between like, am I murdering things or am I super efficient at like scoring points? Like the units just don't just like get to do both. And they also don't get to be like insanely murdery and super resilient. They're like reasonably resilient and super murdery. But like they don't have anything that approaches the Admech blob of like transhuman plus 2-up armor all the time. They can get close to like they can get to like transhuman with 4-up invulnerable saves, but like this requires 3 command points and just like that's you run out of those real quick. Whereas like the Admech is just like it's free and it's happening every turn. So that being said, they are very good. I think this army is very good. I think it's going to catch a lot of people off guard because they have lots and lots of different builds. I think it's gonna be a long time before we figure out what the right build for them is. I talked about like the 2 factions that I'm like that strike me as like the most obvious. But there's lots of other factions that might be like completely reasonable. For example, so there's a sub faction that whenever you use a miracle die on a 4-up, you get another one. This one's very interesting because one of their secondaries is do 2 miracles in a turn. And do 3 miracles in a turn, and this is both your turn and your opponent's turn. Most armies don't have enough miracle dice for that, but that particular one will, because they're just going to generate more miracle dice. And
That's a 2 VP if you do 2, 3 VP if you do 3.
yeah, and this is both, and then it's 1 VP if you do 2, 2 VP if you do 3, plus an extra VP if it was your opponent's turn.
Okay.
So that one's like pretty easy to max out. It maxes at 12. But like, I don't know, being like my chapter tactic is 12 victory points is kind of a neat identity for an army.
I didn't realize it maxed at 12.
Yeah, it maxes at 12 because I think if it maxed at 15, it would be too good. Because only for the one sub faction though. I don't think the other sub factions can score it. The ones that is more interesting is they have a better raised banners where basically every objective marker outside of their deployment zone is worth 4 points and everyone in it is worth 1. So like any game mission where there's like 2 outside, they can just be like, oh look, there's 9 points like for this really easy secondary.
How is it 4 points?
It's just like one of their secondaries.
No, so like I go do an action outside my deployment zone, I get 4 points. My
for
opponent knocking.
No, this is a second. Every objective marker outside your deployment zone that you do this action on is just like 4 points. There's a different one where your opponent can like take points away from you. That one's less interesting. And the last one that's interesting is you get 1 point for killing a unit with a bolter, 1 point for killing them with a flamer, 1 point for killing them with a melta, and 1 point if you do all 3 in the same turn. And I think particularly Argent Shroud is going to find that one be pretty easy. And we're about to go into a discussion of the meta. So I think the last point I want to make it. Well, actually, are there any questions you guys have? Because I've been sort of ranting for a bit now, or comments.
Yeah, I mean, like it definitely strikes me as a codex that has some very strong potential combos. But I mean, I do recognize that there are going to be limits. There's nothing like super absurd like Skitarii Vanguard trading up, for infinity points. That being said, I don't have too much Sisters experience, and I feel like, a lot of people are in the similar boat I am, just because, nobody had the army for a long time.
Yeah, Retributors can trade up for like sort of infinite. But unlike Skitarii Vanguard, there's 5 of them, so they just like get their teeth kicked in the next turn, and like for no real effort. Whereas the thing that makes the Skitarii Vanguard blob in is like not only do they trade up, but then like you have to really think about how you're dealing with them.
Yep.
Also, the Retributors can't teleport, which is puts a bit of a damper on things.
I I don't think they're at mech level. I think they're pretty close to. So, first off, I know Drakari has the insane win percentage. I think Admech is better than Drakari. And I think Sisters might be Drakari level.
That's fair. All right, we're about to talk about the meta. So the last thing I want to talk about is where Sisters fit in the meta. I actually think Sisters are done very kindly to by the meta right now, because right now the boogeyman is Dark Eldar, and like, what do you want against Dark Eldar? You want to be able to crack toughness 6 vehicles and kill infantry that have 6 up invulnerable saves and no armor. And Sisters are a bunch of toughness 3 models with 3 up armor, and that's just like every weapon that wants to do one of those first 2 things lines up real awkwardly against Sisters. Like bolters and auto guns and las cannons are all like, auto guns are kind of just like awkward against them. You want like heavy space marine anti-infantry firepower, like strength 4 guns with AP like 1 to 3, and those are just like not popular right now because you're not getting any, like, the AP doesn't give you any value against Dark Eldar. It's all like melta guns and auto cannons to pop the vehicles, and then like a bunch of like light anti-infantry firepower to just eradicate whatever falls out of them. So Sisters sort of have this defensive profile that is kind of dodging both the anti-tank and the anti-infantry weapons of choice right now. We'll see that. I'm sure we'll see with AdMech coming out. We'll probably see some shifts in what the popular weapons are that could end up being worse for Sisters, but for now it's like pretty good for them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So really quickly, I have a question for you too, and this might sound like a silly question to ask. Are Space Marines, and keep in mind we're breaking up chapters, in the top 10 win percentage? Top 10 factions for win percentage since Drakari have been released. Any other factions?
Like, is there a Space Marine chapter in the top 10?
Yeah.
Man, my gut instinct is yes, but you're asking this question, which means the answer could very well be no.
I mean, isn't every question in the world like that, Ben? I mean, my guess is it's either White Scars are up or there's nobody yet.
Right. It's basically White Scars or bust, right? Or maybe Blood Angels.
But like,
I will tell you that
I'm going to say
Scars,
no.
I will say White Scars have a 49.55% win percentage.
All right, I'm on no.
Well, I mean, like, if they're not if they're not in the top 10, that means that there's 10 factions above White Scars. I mean,
right, so hypothetically, what would those factions be?
I mean, you know, Drakari.
Drakari?
New AdMech Codex hasn't been out long enough.
I think it has been. So we got Drakari, Sisters, AdMech, probably then like Harlequins.
Yeah.
Now the Harlequins are great right now, but I could see them being Space Marines.
I
don't know.
Eldari themselves would just be a separate faction too. Maybe Eldari.
No, there's been like some stupid like Black Templars player who's like, I played in 1 GT and got an 80% win rate, crushed everyone. No one else plays this faction. No.
Every single one of these factions have over 100.
All right. No.
I'm gonna say yes.
Okay. Chris is correct. It is White Scars. They're in 10th place.
Okay, so what are the other ones?
10th place with a 49% win rate? Oh yeah. No, that's not good.
Well, that's what happens when you have 600 games played with a faction that has a 70% win rate.
Thanks.
Oh God, that is how that works, isn't it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So starting from the top, we have Drakari with that 70% win rate we were just talking about, followed by Adeptus Sororitas. Keep in mind this data, they do not have their new codex yet. So
yeah, but their defensive profiles haven't changed though, right? Like the new codex changes offensive, but they're still sort of dodging all the weapons that people are pointing at Drakari.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna be hesitant to say that their codex is a downgrade. I actually think it's like it's an upgrade. It's just probably not as much of an upgrade as all these other factions have gotten.
Oh, I think the new codex is better.
Yeah, so I'm expecting that to go up. Cult Mechanicus, Renegade Knights.
Hold on.
Chaos Knights?
Hold on. Yeah. What is the sample size on
pure Chaos Knights? Or like people misregistering their lists that have Magnus in them as Chaos Knights?
18 Renegade Knights as the primary, which means that I believe that they're full, and then 26 and then of the total 26 lists that have Renegade Knights. So mostly pure Chaos Knights.
All right, go nuts, chaos, I guess.
Then Harlequins, then Death Guard, Chaos Demons, Azurani, with Azurani being half of 40 entries, half of them being
Sean Maiden.
half of them being pure Azurani. 2.
That's just pure craft worlds, right?
Yeah. And then Orcs. And then White Scars. Now, I think this talks about how Jakari just kind of mush Space Marines.
Oh yeah,
It's
Space Marines have
absolutely-
no chance against Rukari. It's disgusting.
Such to the point that like literally every single Space Marine faction is just like down in the dumps. Good news is Death Watch is 11. Yay.
Right.
Insane.
Yeah, it
Yeah. Man, orcs would have a good Dark Eldar matchup, wouldn't they? Where you're just like every single dude has like a million AP0 attacks. Like one boy makes it into combat and kills an entire squad of Dark Eldar. Like, funny.
So it's interesting looking at these and thinking about. I know chapter proof for me feels like a long time ago because I've been moving in, but it was really literally just last week. It's interesting looking at these and thinking that like Space Marines got a lot of nerfs. Do we? I know we had our chapter proof talk a week ago. The paper book just doesn't work. It just doesn't meet the demand. In AOS, what they were doing was any book that was released in the last 4 months could get a FAQ points change a month after their book came out. Do we need something like that for 40k?
Yep.
We have a 70% win rate faction that's like actually altering the meta to the point where I couldn't, like, I would be really reluctant to make point changes to any faction that's not Jakari because Jakari has completely absorbed the meta. Like, I couldn't tell, like, maybe sisters are really broken right now, but it's like we're never going to know while Jakari is on a 7% win rate because
we're all
like,
under their spiked boot heel.
Maybe
right
there's
now.
like something that's like fighting against sisters that's just completely unplayable because Jakari's eating it.
Yeah.
Like if I'm GW right now, I don't think you can make a point change to not Jakari. Like you need that win rate to be like in the 60s before you can even think about touching other factions. Because it makes the meta unreadable.
It's oppressive. It's oppressive and it poisons the rest of the data that we've.
Yeah.
I mean, like I thought the pandemic was going to be like what pushed GW over the edge to, transition to digital rules. And they're like they got so close to it. They got right up to the precipice and then like it just pulled back at the last second once, they got like negative feedback about the app. Feels like.
Yeah, I'm glad that we did see some Dark Eldar point changes in the Raider, but like it wasn't enough. Like maybe we give it another week or two with the new FAQ to see if like liquefiers being gone is like a big deal. Like that really changes some stuff, but oh man, 70% is a problem.
Well, when you think about so part of the problem with liquefiers, they were kind of good against everything. But if you really think about what liquefiers were good against, it was 2 wound models that were trying to rely on like their toughness, right?
And armor saves.
Yeah.
And
is a Space Marine. So while the question is, did Jakari need liquefiers to beat Space Marines? And the answer is kind of no. So like, is losing liquefiers actually like relevant? I think it might be relevant for like the Renegade Knights we're talking about here, but I actually can't. Do you need liquefiers against Adeptus Sororitas? No. Cult Mechanicus? No. Renegade Knights? Yes. Harlequins? No. Death Guard, no, because they reduce the damage by 1. Chaos Demons, no. Azurani, no. Orcs, no. Right? Like, don't get me wrong, wounding on 3 Flamers are like fine against some of these things, but they're not really like doing it, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's not
I agree.
more efficient than. So,
It's not more like more witches or something.
yeah. I actually think more witches would do a lot better against a lot of those combinations.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Oh, maybe not against AdMech.
maybe not against AdMech. It's awkward because we do know. I have to imagine that the Thousand Suns and the Grey Knights probably in 3 weeks, maybe even,
Yeah,
right?
probably.
Though if we look at, let's just say the last 3 codexes are going to become 30% of the meta, which is a real chance, right? Yeah. Would you want to play Thousand Suns or Grey Knights when like a 6 of the meta is Adeptus Sortus who can kind of just auto win against you? Probably
No,
not, right? Like I
Not
actually,
even a little bit, no.
it with any hope those books will like they need to have a psychic focus because obviously that's what those factions are for. But maybe there will be builds that aren't psychic focused that like give them a Adeptus Sortus matchup.
You see Grants having like a reasonable matchup, but like Thousand Suns are just going to be because Grey Knights, every dude is also a melee threat, and the shooting sisters list can kind of fall apart in melee, and the sisters list can kind of fall apart to shooting. And Grey Knights can just like represent both, but like Thousand Suns tend to be a little bit more focused on like doing damage with their psychic powers, and are oftentimes extraordinarily reliant on their like if they're anything like the 8th edition codex,
ones, right?
Anything like their 8th edition codex, their models go from like unplayable to broken based on the number of psychic powers that you can get off on them. And if you play against sisters, you're just going to like march a bunch of unplayable models across the table and watch them get picked up by like bolters. So yeah, I don't think either of those codexes like really fix the problem. Because I think sisters just have like already kind of put the kibosh on them. With the one exception being, Thousand Suns in their 8th edition codex did play around a lot with uncounterable powers in like weird relics and stratagems that were unusable. So if GW just pushes those from unusable to reasonable, we could start seeing some neat stuff happen.
I was like thinking about that. Now that they're upping the amount of wounds, all their models are going to have. What if you had what if you had like a ability that says on any roll of a double, excluding double ones, your power auto goes off, can't be denied, but you take mortal wound, or like some weird ability like that.
Yeah, so like that relic exists, but like I don't know if they can make that as an army-wide rule. We'll see.
What
They
if
have
this was
options.
Cult of Magic?
I mean, then Cult of Magic would only be good if sisters were a big part of the meta, which like is miserable. But like they have the option, right? Like I don't know. I think there's too many things they could do with the cults and Thousand Suns to like make reasonable predictions. They could go in so many directions. But I agree with what you're saying. I think that like as is, the 2 psychic armies are gonna be in like a pretty rough spot, given the way that sisters just like completely cuts the kibosh on the psychic phase.
And especially if they go like damage focused, Admech can they have 1 CP for Feel No Pain against like powers. Like
Yeah. On vehicles, which just sort of require them to put vehicles in front of their army, but by the way, Argent Shroud has that exact stratagem, but for infantry. So, like, good luck. That's the shooting faction for sisters that I think is really good.
I know. It's the entire story's coming together.
Which then also makes me a little afraid. Like, man, if Thousand Suns have a reasonable sisters matchup, you can actually just pick up your army and shake your opponent's hand every time you play against a Thousand Suns player if you're not playing sisters. Like,
right?
If
that's the problem. You can't.
If sisters have a reasonable Thousand Suns matchup, how does any other army have a reasonable Thousand Suns matchup? which
a good
brings me back
question.
to like maybe things are just undeniable.
Yeah, I don't know. But like, this is like the bad type of escalation, right? Where like Sister's got a good deny, thus now everything's undeniable. Woohoo!
I mean, I think you can make it better, more reasonable than that. Like you could just make it like the psychic tides that Grey Knights have, and just have one of the tides be powers or undeniable. And then like it's not just like, oh, they're undeniable, it's free. Like, no, you're giving something up. Like there's like some other ability you'd rather be running, but you're obligated to do this in order to like actually have your powers working.
What if it was an unmodified roll of a 9+?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's probably not good because the math on that's like pretty bad. But anyway.
Here's something to hope for. It lets you get to like maybe Armin does do that reroll just so his power goes off. I don't know.
Aren't we all so happy about the state of the game? Aren't we giving our listeners a great hope and a reason that they should be playing? It's funny because I've been greatly enjoying my games of 40k. They've been a lot of fun, and I think a lot of that has to do with like I've been playing locally. I've been playing at big events that are just like Mono Dark Eldar. Although, man, I actually played against Mono Dark Eldar at the tournament I went to. So what do I know?
Didn't you do it twice?
Yeah, I played against you and 2 Dark Eldar players.
I mean, like honestly, right now with the state of the game, it is being what it is. If I was like playing in like the national like circuit right now, if there wasn't a pandemic that had prevented me from playing any games in the past 18 months, I probably would have just been like, you know what, I'm good until they fix this. I'm gonna go play Sigmar 3.0.
Well, that's the funny thing right now. It's going to be hard for GW to detect how much the unstable meta is actually affecting their numbers, right? Because like they could just say, "Oh, this is caused by the pandemic," right? When reality is the number could be significantly higher,
I think they know though, right?
or
Because
vice versa.
they've had bad metas in the past, and they've literally known that those hit numbers. So like even if they don't know like, oh, maybe it's this, like they know this meta's not good. They have to know. They see the numbers.
With how committed they
I was saying
are,
vice versa, right?
with how committed with how committed GW is now to like keeping an eye on the competitive scene, and you know, keeping the pulse with like their meta watch articles and hiring Mike Brandt. They're not dumb. Like, yeah, is GW headquarters like an ocean away in Nottingham? Yes. But we're also not sending letters by fucking pigeon anymore. They know what's going on over here. They know what's going on in tournaments all over the world. You know, there's no way that they don't.
Right. But so I know I've said vice versa a few times here, but let me explain that. Think about what Chris just said, like 2 minutes ago. He's still going to play in a tournament because he hasn't played in a tournament in 18 months, right?
Oh, I get what you're saying. Okay. Yep. Sure.
It's going to be very hard in like many directions for him to figure out like how much people are actually upset by this. Like, but GW, it'd be nice if they like. I know they've had the Falcon on some of their articles before. I don't know if they've ever talked about like what they consider a acceptable win rate is for a faction.
Yeah. I don't know. So let's real quick, I think we should all say what we think like our fixes would be, and then maybe call the show.
Yeah.
So what do you, so obviously we all agree Dark Eldar need to get taken down a couple notches, right? And we also think that AdMac needs to get like bumped. What's the fix here?
Oh shit. I don't. I mean, it's a question of, all right, is Dark Eldar dominance because something is just undercosted, and you know people are just using that to exploit and you know trade up their raiders for much more expensive units, or is it something like fundamental, something with the entire faction's design philosophy, like you know their lightning fast raiders where like their transports fly and everything, you know, or is that the problem? Because it's like similar to the Tau question where, all right, is it, do people hate Tau because you know like they trade up and you know it's just boring to play against, or is it an actual like fundamental issue where there's not a lot of interaction, or people are just really salty about like the 6th edition like devilfish hack.
You've dodged my question. What's your solution?
I don't have a solution because I'm not a game designer.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
So I think it's points. I So I think AdMech has one or two bad, poorly designed stratagems.
Mhm.
I think that you take a strength 3 gun and you completely mitigate the downside of having a strength 3 gun by saying 4+ is wound to hit wound. That's a bad design. But besides that, I think it's general
But they had that before.
points.
They've had poison weapons before.
4+ is to hit wound.
Hit.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, that's awful.
On like anything. It just kills you. You just
Sorry,
you
I misheard you. Yeah.
Yeah, that should be. You think that shouldn't exist, or do you think it should like go to 5s?
I mean, why isn't it in line with other factions that on unmodified 6s like auto wound? Like that's already like force multiplier that other factions have access to.
That's like the baseline ability on that gun, though.
I think it should be 2 CP. So if I do a comparison to Space Marines, right? So Space Marines have on their basic troops double shoot your intercessors, right? You're doubling the shooting efficiency, right?
Mhm.
But if you take a strength 3 gun and you're saying 4+ is to hit, you're more than doubling the efficiency that gun is putting out.
Yeah.
So I think it should at least be 2 CP. And to be honest, the way people are kind of breaking it, you're bringing in like huge squads. So I think it should kind of be like you bring a 10-man squad, you can use it for 2 CP, and then if you bring it up, if you use on anything above a 10-man, it's 4 CP, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think you could do that, or you could call it 5-ups, but then you have to errata it one or another. So
part of my problem with the
Okay.
unit is even if you were to delete the stratagem, the unit's like 20-man blob is still very resilient and still shoots up a lot of the time.
Yeah, I almost think the stratagem just should be gone.
No, I'm saying even with the stratagem gone though, this is where I think it's a points efficiency problem. Like you do 60 shots where you're hitting on 6s, rerolling once, so you get 6s to hit auto wound, rerolling once. That means you got 12 successful wound rolls just through hitting. And you're probably throwing an AP on there, and that's like better than the 10-man intercessor squad is going to do in regards to number of successful wounds.
So I think sorry, are you cool if I throw my thoughts out there?
Yeah, go ahead.
So for AdMech, I think you got a couple options. I don't hate just throwing the stratagem in the garbage. I think you could also just admit that Skachari going to 20 was a mistake, and they go back to 10 now, and that experiment's over. Alternatively, just literally give Skachari 11 through 20 a different point cost. I think Skachari at 8 points are fine in 10-man squads.
I agree.
And then like the 11th guy should probably cost 20 points. Like every dude after that, it's unbelievable how efficient the 20-man squad is compared to the 10-man squad.
This is just and for our listeners, this is just because of how you stack buffed on things.
Yeah, just because the way you stack buffs on them. And I think like 8 points for 10 is fine. And I wouldn't want to like take like Skachari as reasonable troop choices away from that book, because I think there's like very reasonable, fair things you can do. Just like, oh yeah, I brought like 50 rangers and 10-man squads. Like, cool. Like, that's cool. They'll do some stuff. They'll kill some stuff. They'll be reasonably resilient. They're not breaking anything. My gut instinct is that GW won't do this, but I think the best fix is literally just to go Skachari squads are 1 to 10, period. That's it. Like, I think that fixes almost every issue of like the really broken stuff that's coming out of that book. For Dark Eldar, I actually have one. I think you only really need to do one thing. And that is take the Cult of Strife and turn it into an army of renown. If you want the Cult of Strife, your whole army is Cult of Strife. You can't bring Cabals. You can't bring Homunculus Covens. Like, if you want the super murder succubus who for 60 points can kill an Imperial Knight, cool. Your whole army is Cult of Strife. Like, you can bring the shooting that Raiders have Their shooting is reasonably good, but gets way worse when they're not all rerolling all their hit rolls. No Trueborn for you. You're putting witches and raiders, and like that's your army. Because every competitive Drakari list is just Cult of Strife, Mega Murder Succubus, plus Jazar, plus Cult of Strife, either the Skyboard Riders or the bikes that they're going to like charge 1,000,000 inches on turn 1 and reroll all their hit rolls and wound rolls as they fight twice. And it's just the same theme in every army. Is you have this like 800 to 900 points of heinously broken units that they're going to dump all of their command points into, and then like 1,100 points of highly mobile shooting. And those two things being allowed to exist in the same list is not okay. And honestly, I have a Dark Eldar friend, couple Dark Eldar friends who'd like probably be happy about this because it literally makes more builds viable for the codex. Because right now, when you build a Dark Eldar army, you go, all right, Patrol of Cult of Strife. All right, now what am I doing with the rest of the list?
Patrol of Cabal the Black Heart. And then what is my third patrol, which is actually where I get to go like make my own decision.
Yeah, and like it makes real space raids like not exist. Like no one plays real space raids because you can't take your stupid Cult of Strife detachment in a real space raid. Yeah, so I think Cult of Strife was a mistake. I am upset that like half of those rules got printed as is. I don't know what they were thinking. Like all of their like solutions to all their problems are just like out of that thing. And I think that if you took that away, that actually takes so much out of the book that you might even be able to give them 10 points back on Raiders. Like, I think Cult of Strife is unbelievably unbalanced, and we're like looking at all these different places in the book to take power away. And it's just like, if you take this away, you might actually need to help the book a little bit. Maybe not, but I think that Cult of Strife needs to go as anything other than mono Cult of Strife.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
You can still play one unit of Cult of Strife with the one relic that's in the book, right? Just to confirm your hypothetical.
You can bring the Army of Renown is like the everything in the whatchamacallit Book of Russ is what I meant. Yeah, Cult of Strife. Yeah, if you want to make your detachment Cult of Strife and use their one stratagem, their one warlord trait, and their one relic from the book, that's fine. But you can't spend 4 CP to double fight a unit that full rerolls. Like, that's just nonsense.
Randomly ignore Overwatch, which is like another big downside. It's
everything's in the book. Like, and the succubus with 10 gajillion attacks with Black Lotus poison for damage 2. Every time she misses, she gets to make more attacks. Like, it's all in that book. And they're all really problematic things.
Yeah. And
so rather than, because this also then brings us to the point where like we have to like start nerfing succubi, right? Like a succubus needs to be like 200 points if like we're okay with this. And rather than making every other version of a succubus unplayable, I think it's just like, all right, like you have the restriction on the Cult of Strife, and we let all the other things in the book like exist in a world where their points costs reflect like a playable version of themselves.
Yeah.
And that is my opinion.
Yeah.
We've broke Chris.
Okay.
Chris,
it's getting close to
how about this? We're gonna go back to an earlier question. Your earlier question, what would I do right now? My answer would be go to an old friend, buy $1,000 worth of Dark Eldar models for $100, and be all set.
Yeah.
And you might say, but Kevin, that sounds like a pipe dream. What if I told you I knew someone who this happened to about a week ago?
Yeah, man. We were playing some Crusade, and our buddy showed us like, I bought this for $100. 14 Raiders. Like, all right.
What the fuck?
That must be nice. And on that note, I think we should probably call it.
Okay. Oh geez, that 14 Raiders for $100.
Ring the bell, hit the like button. This has been 3D6 Charge Podcast. Don't roll any ones. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Kevin. Yep, there's the outro.